Now, speaking of the U.S. Supreme Court, which I was just doing, believe it or not, sounded like I was heading off into another riff on this crazed religious bullshit. And I came close, but I'm pulling back. The Supreme Court right now has all sorts of cases that it has to deal with. And the decision by Colorado's Supreme Court to bar the Antichrist from the Christian fascist primary ballot in that state, that case is going to skip ahead in the line. And the court announced Friday afternoon that they are going to hear it. We're going to move you up. What do you think of that? But there is no world, we damn sure don't live in one, where this case can be fairly heard by all 9 justices. You know who I'm talking about. Now, as far as I'm concerned, this is according to MSNBC, Hayes Brown, who weighed in with an opinion. But you know my opinion. There are very few justices on the Supreme Court who have who are free from religious bullshit to make decisions about something that is strictly religious in origin, and that is laws against abortion. Has nothing whatsoever to do with medicine, everything to do with these crazed fucking religions. So, in my opinion, there are very few Supreme Court justices qualified or able to hear a case such as the one involving Trump's fitness to be on the ballot in Colorado, especially not Judge Clarence Thomas. Now, he has committed all sorts of ethical lapses over his years on the high court. We know this. And he's heard cases involving his old lady, Ginny, and her Nazi work. He's taken lavish gifts from a billionaire benefactor that has business before the court. He's neglected to list those gifts on documents designed to provide the transparency in the judicial process in this country, which Clarence Thomas and some of these judges say, oh, fuck you, we're not going to do that. Huh? But there's no question that Clarence Thomas has got to recuse himself from any decision regarding the Colorado case. And if he doesn't, that would be, according to Hayes Brown, that would be the greatest betrayal of his oath to faithfully and impartially discharge and perform all the duties incumbent upon him as a justice of the Supreme Court. But Uncle Clarence doesn't operate that way. First of all, this white devil that he's married to, this Christian devil, Ginny, controls his ass. You know this is, come on, you know this, and so do I. That's one of the reasons he, for so many years, has sat in the corner with his thumb in his mouth, never saying a word, until people started pointing out that he was sitting in the corner with his thumb in his mouth, never saying a word. And then all of a sudden, Uncle Clarence started to express himself, you might say. And most of his expression has been simply proto-fascist. Every single thing that this man has done. He's a liar and a grifter to begin with. Now, the voters in Colorado, Republicans who successfully sued to have Trump barred under the 14th Amendment, along with the Colorado Republican Party, have asked the justices to move quickly to hear the case and issue a swift ruling. Now, lest you don't understand, the Colorado Republican Party is facing a schism right now. There are people within the leadership of that party who don't want Trump anywhere near a presidential ballot or a primary ballot in the state of Colorado. And there are people within the Republican Party, the corpse that's still animated somehow, I don't know, who do want Trump there. But the case was brought by a group of people, both Democrat and Republican. Now, the justices on the Supreme Court also agreed on Friday to hear arguments. They're going to hear it on February 8th. But the clock is ticking because the state of Colorado, which votes almost entirely by mail. If you ever traveled in Colorado, you know why. Colorado needs to prepare the ballots to be sent to residents by February 12th for the primary. What about the voters overseas? Service members. Ahead of the court's decision on Thursday, a group of Democrats in the U.S. House sent Uncle Clarence a letter demanding that he recuse himself from the Colorado case as to Trump's viability on their primary ballot. That case is known as Anderson versus Griswold. There you go. And the Democrats in the Congress who sent this letter to Thomas specifically cited his old lady as a factor of why they're demanding that Clarence recuse himself. Now, Trump appointed 3 of the 9 justices on the bench. And a recent NBC News analysis documented that the court's conservative supermajority doesn't always rule in Trump's favor. But usually when they don't rule in Trump's favor, it's some nitshit little issue that really doesn't matter when you get right down to it, one way or the other. This issue matters monumentally. The level of connection that Ginny has to the orange Antichrist himself and the movement that attempted to help him overturn the 2020 elections results places Ginny in a class all by herself and a genuine cause for alarm. Now, since Uncle Clarence does exactly what his white wife tells him to do, when she says shut up, he shuts up. When she says do this, he does that. How do you know that, Mike? Oh, please. Have you ever seen the two of them together? Watch the body language. Ginny is the master, and Uncle Clarence is, well, not the master. Let me put it that way. So what the Democrats are saying, look, in this case especially, Mr. Justice Thomas, recuse yourself. Your humble and obedient servants here would no more call him Mr. Justice Thomas than I would pee up a rope. To me, he's Uncle Clarence, and his old lady is the 10th seat on the Supreme Court, maybe the 9th. Clarence is just a placeholder for her. Now, in making their case, these Democrats in Congress, and by the way, they're led by Georgia Representative Hank Johnson, who just happens to be an African American. But anyway, the case cite the Supreme Court's newly developed Code of Ethics to show that Uncle Clarence still needs to step aside. And that code, which was written and put in place, it has no enforcement or punishment clauses in it, but the code is there, and it was largely put in place in response to the bullshit of Uncle Clarence. Now, the code isn't perfect, especially when there's no way to punish someone who violates it, but its section on recusal clearly applies in this case, as the letter from the Democrats on Thursday made clear. This, in part, is what that letter said. Quote, a justice should disqualify himself or herself in a proceeding in which the justice's impartiality might reasonably be questioned. That is, where an unbiased and reasonable person who is aware of all relevant circumstances would doubt that the justice could fairly discharge his or her duties, end quote. Now, the code goes on to detail such instances, including those in which, quote, the justice knows that the justice or the justice's spouse has a financial interest in the subject matter in controversy or in a party to the proceeding, or any other interest that could be affected substantially by the outcome of the proceeding, end quote. Or those in which, quote, the justice or the justice's spouse is known by the justice to have an interest that could be substantially affected by the outcome of the proceeding, end quote. Just for shits and giggles, truth seekers, which wife of the male members of the United States Supreme Court would be affected substantially by the outcome of the proceeding when they decide whether or not to throw the Antichrist off the ballot in Colorado? Why, time's up. Of course it's Ginny Thomas, who was instrumental in trying to overturn the government along with her lord and master, the Antichrist Donald Trump. So what's Clarence going to do? Well, the letter from the Democrats homes in on the financial gain at stake for both the Thomases should Trump be allowed to run and win. The letter from the Democrats reads, quote, "It is foreseeable that your wife's earning capacity will be positively impacted should the court grant the relief sought by the former president. Your wife's income benefits your household, therefore your family, and by extension, you personally. You have a financial stake in the outcome of this case, which disqualifies you from any involvement in it," end quote. Now, I would not find fault with you if you came to the conclusion that this yelling via a letter from the Democrats to Uncle Clarence is just shouting into the wind. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.